And away we go. So, just before recording just started, Eric messaged in the Discord group chat saying he's got to he's got to do the closing shift of the job he's working at, so he will not be able to join the episode. And of course, I'm not sure about Risk. He could join, however, in the last few episodes of this podcast and the other podcasts, he has not showed up. And when he does, for some reason, his audio file gets corrupted. So everything he said in the last episode he's appeared in doesn't get even featured. Well, it's a good thing it's a good thing I try to reference him by name, just so it's inevitably clear. But hey, mistakes happen, whether or not they are intentional. But I digress. So, let's see what is in the news today. Well, there's one thing on the news. There's one thing in the news that's getting a lot of attention, and certainly people will not shut up about. Trump says Gaza hostages should be released Monday or Tuesday. Plans to attend signing in Egypt. Also, some kind of peace agreement has been drawn up by Donald Trump, and apparently Hamas and/or Israeli forces seem to agree with it. At least, as at least rough extracts from what I've heard. President Donald Trump said on Thursday the Gaza hostages should be released on Monday or Tuesday, and that he hopes to attend a signing ceremony in Egypt and address the Israeli. Trump opened a White House cabinet meeting by discussing a deal reached on Wednesday under which the hostages held by Hamas militants are to be released in the first phase of a broader Gaza plan. He said he believed it would lead to lasting peace. I'm not so sure about that, but it's a start. Trump said under the plan, Gaza is going to be slowly redone, a reference to plans to rebuild the Palestinian enclave. He did not provide details other than to say, we're going to create something where people can live. You can't live right now in Gaza. Hamas is expected to release the 20 living hostages together, 72 hours after the ceasefire begins. We are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be a day of joy, Trump said. Trump said it may be difficult to retrieve all the remains of the hostages who died in captivity immediately, because some of the bodies are going to be a little bit hard to find. He said he was going to try to make the trip there to attend a signing ceremony in Egypt. The White House has been scrambling to work out the details of the hastily arranged trip. The Israeli Knesset has asked Trump to speak, and the president said he was planning to do so if requested. While questions remain about what happens in the region in the long term, Trump said he hoped it would lead to an everlasting peace. Now, I would say something. However, I came across a story on Instagram said by a very well-known Formula One driver that actually that sums everything up, and I will read to you right now what that Formula One racer has said. Bringing hostages home and to return peace to Palestine. Like many of you, there have been times I have felt totally powerless about the tragedy unfolding in Gaza, and this is a day I wasn't sure would come. Now, for the first time in a long time, Palestinians can allow themselves hope again. But we can't forget that this deal has come too late for the 67,000 people who have died in Gaza, including 20,000 innocent children. We won't forget them or the suffering of the survivors. This agreement is an incredible first step to peace, but it will take hard work and the support of everyone around the world to help Palestinians as they rebuild their lives after the suffering of the past few years. I'm so full of hope for the future. and grateful to everyone who kept believing that this would be possible, and to the doctors, aid workers, and others who have shown us the very best of humanity. But there is still work to do, and I know that the charities on the ground will not rest until they can deliver the aid that people so desperately need. Now, more than ever, they need our support. The eyes of the world must stay on Gaza. I can't have said that better myself. There's no other way of describing the situation as it is right now. I'm glad there is something to be done. I am glad there is progress for peace within Gaza. And, of course, that whatever conflict between Hamas and the Israeli militant forces, that there are signs that peace will come back once again. But of course, the moment I first heard about this news, I have said to myself I was not going to jump to conclusions. This may sound too good to be true. However, that is because it is. I still want more progress to come out. I still want to see more progress beyond what is being reported right now. However, whatever that progress will be, we are not too sure. Again, words cannot be spoken about the situation, only emotions, expressions, and, dare I say, actions. Because actions speak louder than words. They speak 1,000 words for every action there is that has been executed. And whichever side people are on with what is going on in Gaza, there comes a point, and it is right now, that they want this conflict, the genocide, as they call it, to stop. It's not over yet, but there is progress. I'll take any progress than nothing at all, and that I will leave it with that. Starlink satellites deorbit at unprecedented rate. Harvard Smithsonian astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell stated last week that one or two Starlink satellites now re-enter Earth's atmosphere every day, burning up overhead. This increase comes as SpaceX and competitors rapidly expand their low Earth orbit satellite constellations, with more than 8,000 Starlink satellites currently in service and thousands more being launched annually. Scientists have raised concerns that the metallic particles released when these satellites burn up could impact Earth's stratosphere, but research on the long-term effects remained inconclusive. McDowell emphasized the scientific uncertainty surrounding the situation, noting it remains unknown if the consequences will be significant enough to pose serious problems or not. As satellite numbers grow and re-entries raised to an expected 5 per day, some experts warn that environmental impacts and collision risks may escalate without further study and mitigation. Now, I want to know what people that have been advocating for climate change and saying that if we don't do this and we don't do that, all the ice caps are going to rapidly melt. If not rapidly, gradually in the next few decades. I want to know what these people have to say regarding satellites re-entering Earth's orbit. If this was a serious issue, we would have heard stories like this years ago. Why now are we talking about this? This adds to the climate change spectacle, the climate change conversation. If people are bringing up the fact that the satellites that were going through Earth's orbit and then re-enter Earth's gravitational pull, landing wherever they land, whether it be the ocean or on land, then to say this is a risk to climate change. This is a serious threat to our environment. If we don't do something, then we never know if we can reverse these negative effects. This doesn't just add to the unseriousness of whether or not we can leave our planet. This also adds to the unseriousness regarding concerns of climate change. I'm not denying climate change. If this was a serious issue, if climate change is as big of an issue people say it is, I think a huge majority of not just experts, but a majority of members of the public would automatically on board with taking whatever measures that needs to be taken to combat the issues that experts say that there are going on. And issues on climate change and issues with our environment are two separate things. I have opinions. I have very different opinions, specifically for those two separate topics, and I will stand with those opinions no matter what. Even when people say that there is some similarities or coalition between the two, I still believe there are differences within protecting our environment and combating climate change. Our climate has been changing for many decades, many centuries even. And no matter how hard people try to combat climate change, the changes to our climate are inevitable. Okay, so hurtling back to the story about Starlink satellites, the orbit at unprecedented rates, makes me more skeptical now. And I don't want to be skeptical about anything. However, you cannot deny and you cannot agree to anything anymore without actually looking into the risks, the concerns, and other factors that goes into construction of satellites, impact of that satellites in our orbits, and whatever risks that comes with having those satellites going with it circling around our orbit. Even people are saying that there are environmental risks to it. This is a lot for me to take into. But someone's going to do something about that. Someone's going to do something, but it won't be enough. Nor is it going to be effective as we want it to be. Bear enters Japanese supermarket, pounces on customer as nationwide toll reaches new high. A bear rampaged through the sushi section of a supermarket in central Japan on Tuesday, the latest in a series of attacks that have raised this year's death toll to a record high. Two customers, ages 69 and 76, were injured when the 1.4-meter tall bear crossed a parking lot before entering a supermarket in the city of Numata, about 130 kilometers north of Tokyo, according to local police. One was injured in the parking lot and the other inside the store. Although this encounter was not fatal, two bear attacks earlier this month brought the death toll to 7 so far this year. According to official data and local press reports, the highest annual figure since records began in 2006. Around 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday, about 40 people were shopping when the bear entered the store and pounced on a customer, Japanese public broadcaster NHK reported. Two customers suffered minor injuries, according to police. Experts say bears are increasingly venturing outside their traditional habitats and into urban areas in search of food, because climate change is interfering with flowering and pollination of some of their traditional food sources. However, the supermarket manager told NHK that the bear did not seem interested in food. It looked like he had entered the store, wanted to leave, but couldn't, and then got nervous, she said. As the manager tried to evacuate the customers, the bear ran away. I often hear news reports about bears entering stores, but I never imagined one would actually come to ours, the manager told NHK. Earlier this month, two deaths were attributed to bear attacks, bringing the annual death toll to 7. Then, on Wednesday morning, a body with scratches that appeared to be from a bear was discovered in northern Iwate Prefecture, NHK reported, possibly raising the death toll even further. Tuesday's attack added to a series of reported encounters between bears and humans across the country this week. Well, I will say one thing, and this is just me. I know people will have their 2 cents on the situation. What if it's not our environment that's causing the bears to enter these supermarkets? What if it's our urban population and urban landscape that's ever so expanding into rural areas? So much so to the point that it is impossible for any wildlife to not enter any indoor built up facilities across any country, not just Japan, but anywhere in the world. How much of the rural land is there left in a country to the point where wildlife are likely to enter into built up areas like supermarkets, homes? If you're starting to see bears entering supermarkets, it's not just about how close to the countryside that supermarket is. The question now becomes, how much built up urban land is there in that country where seeing wildlife encounters face to face is becoming more common with people living in urban areas? Another question comes down to the amount of urban land that is being built up, and how many people living in said urban areas are more likely to be encountered with wildlife. That is the question that will be brought up time and time again, more frequently in the future. No, I'm not saying it's true. However, there have been a handful, and I'm not saying what specific source that says this. Got, I've seen a handful of sources in the last few years, at least 5 or 6 years, seeing a rising trend of people living in the countryside moving into major cities, or at least any urban areas. There is a consistent rise and gradual rise of people living in countryside and into major cities or any built up urban land. That is for certain. And that's not going to stop. And also, on an unrelated note, in the UK, especially in major cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Glasgow, even, I'm seeing a lot of foxes, wild foxes, becoming friendly and approachable to humans, as if there is a phase of domestication, similar to cats and dogs, thousands of years ago. So yeah, now there's many reasons why foxes are wanted to be domesticated. I know there's experts, they'll have a lot more to say on that. However, but of course, this is not the only isolated case of wildlife interacting with urban life. A pattern like that is on the rise, for sure. And it's going to continue growing, for sure. The EU offers new protections for farmers as it seeks to build support for Mercosur trade deal. On October 8th, the European Commission proposed a regulation to strengthen protections for EU farmers under the EU-Mercosur partnership agreement by making EMPA safeguards binding EU law. Facing strong opposition, EU farmers in France and the Netherlands warned the pact risks unfair competition and environmental harm, while far-right parties lionized protests ahead of EU-wide elections 2024. The plan sets a 10% threshold and allows the European Commission to open investigations if Mercosur import prices are lower, with provisional safeguards activated within 21 days and reports every 6 months. Farmers gain new channels to request investigation, and if serious injury is found, preferential tariffs could be temporarily withdrawn. Special rules cover sensitive sectors like beef, eggs, and ethanol, with a 99,000-ton carcass weight beef quota phased in over 5 years at a 7.5% tariff. If ratified, the deal would create a free trade zone covering 780 million people and nearly a quarter of global GDP, while EU agricultural exports reached €235.4 billion in 2024. Beef quota. Where on earth have I heard something like this before? It sounds very familiar to me. Although not directly, I feel there have been similar conversations like this happening before for many, many years. If there are farmers in opposition to this agreement, I would listen. I would absolutely listen to them. Because whilst agriculture is an important sector, regardless of how much attention it gets, in the public media, mainstream media, there is no doubt farmers play a big role in agriculture, in every aspect of agriculture in general. Now, I'm not saying I'm against this because the farmers say they are against it. You know something's up if the farmers in Europe have something to say about this offer. I'm not too sure what are the changes that needs to be done. However, I think the EU has to make some changes at bare minimum if they want to continue going ahead with ensuring the security and safety of the agriculture sector in Europe. Although I'm not against the EU making trade deals with other international organizations, you cannot put other organizations over native against those within your own borders. Prioritize your own people and your own organizations first before making deals with organizations and people from other countries and continents. Start local before going abroad. And this goes for everything. It doesn't get any simpler than that. New California law aims to improve school nutrition by phasing out some ultra-processed foods. California will phase out certain ultra-processed foods from school meals over the next decade under a first-in-the-nation law signed Wednesday by Governor Gavin Newsom. The law seeks to define ultra-processed foods, the often super tasty products typically full of sugar, salt, and unhealthy fats. The legislation requires the state Department of Public Health to adopt rules by mid-2028 defining ultra-processed foods of concern and restricted school foods. Schools have to start phasing out those foods by July 2029, and districts will be barred from selling them for breakfast or lunch by July 2035. Vendors will be banned from providing the foods of concern to schools by 2032. Newsom, flanked by first partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom, and state lawmakers signed the measure at a middle school in Los Angeles. California has never waited for Washington or anyone else to lead on kids' health. We've been out front for years, removing harmful additives and improving school nutrition, Newsom said in a statement. This first-in-the-nation law builds on that work to make sure every California student has access to healthy, delicious meals that help them thrive. Newsom issued an executive order earlier this year, requiring the Department of Public Health to provide recommendations by April on limiting harms from ultra-processed foods. The Democratic governor signed a law in 2023 banning certain synthetic food dyes from school meals. Well, on one hand, it's great to see that there is progress being made to ensure that all of the junk and the garbage in food in the US is being prohibited. There's now some kind of law in the process of being signed into law preventing whoever is responsible for making the food that's provided to children that you cannot put this food dye in, you cannot put this amount of sugar or unhealthy fats in these kinds of food that will be served to children. I'm glad that progress like that is being made. On the other hand, why now? Although it's great that there's progress being made, I don't think it's enough given the amount of time that it took to even get to that point, especially the time frame this legislation like this could have been passed to ensure the safety and and of course health of the children. Whilst I'm glad something's done about the food, I don't think it's enough. And the fact that California is actually doing something about ultra-processed foods being sold in high schools and schools across the state, that actually says something. Whilst the current administration in the US are so hard on tackling the vaccines, the health of our children, how is it that California is passing legislation within their own state? No, I'm not giving California or Gavin Newsom as much credit as they should. I'm just saying, how is it that a fully Democrat state is doing more to tackle ultra-processed foods than most other states in the US? I hope more states follow, regardless of whoever the state governor is, and especially their political affiliation. I don't think the health of our food is a political matter. It's a genuine concern that everyone should be concerned about. Look, I'll this one time I will say good on you, California, for actually doing something about the junk in your food. And for other states, and especially the current U.S. administration, they say that something should be done about whatever junk is in their food in the US. Look, glad to see progress being made. But of all states, how come it has to be California? How of all states, California is actually the first state actually making a legislation on this? And again, not giving them too much credit because I think, given the amount of time Gavin Newsom has been governor of California, if this was a serious issue, it should have been signed. Such legislation should have been signed years ago. But hey, better later than never. I will give them that. That is all I have to say. PayPal and Binance Japan form capital and business alliance. On October 9th, PayPal Corporation, a SoftBank Corp group company, announced a capital and business alliance in Tokyo, acquiring a 40% equity stake in Binance Japan, aiming to diversify beyond payments. PayPay views the investment as meeting retail users in Japan's demand for secure, regulated crypto access, while combining its payment scale with Binance Japan's blockchain expertise. Initial integrations will allow Binance Japan users to buy and sell crypto using PayPay Money within the app, including withdrawals via PayPay Money, the company said. With PayPay's backing, Binance Japan will accelerate growth and let millions of Japanese consumers trade and use cryptocurrencies within the PayPay ecosystem. Regulatory pressures persist as Binance Japan has worked closely with Japan's Financial Services Agency to meet compliance standards amid a confidential US SEC filing and a recent BNB token surged over 26%. Only a step closer to the integration of cryptocurrencies across the globe. There is still more work to be done in regards to giving access for cryptocurrency transaction and transfers, whatever people use money for these days, across the globe. This is only closing the gap between using fiat money and digital money, specifically crypto. If you're not aware of crypto yet, this is the time to jump on that bandwagon now. And whilst people believe that it's too late, I'm late to the crypto trend. No, you're not. No one is ever late to be jumping on crypto. As of this recording, you can jump onto crypto right now, and you could be better off than a huge majority of the world's population. That's how little. That's how little amount of people are even aware of crypto, let alone using it. There is so much there's so much potential of crypto. Of course, there are concerns about how you transaction specific types of crypto because there's so many types of crypto and so many systems that people could use. But once you get a clear understanding of crypto, once you start using it, imagine the possibilities you could have. I'm just saying, people don't have to use crypto now. They can wait a few years and still be early to using crypto. But just know, it's important you understand the crypto world as much as you know about whatever job or interest that you have. There is so much more to crypto than just a blockchain, Bitcoin, and the fact that governments don't have much of a say or control on what is to be done about crypto and how crypto is moved about in our day-to-day lives. That's the beauty of it. Majority of people, members of the public, have the majority of the say. At least that's at least in broad terms. Again, if you're not too sure, do some research in your own time about crypto and how it works. I will tell you right now, even if you don't want to get into crypto, you'll be better off now having the knowledge, knowing about what crypto is, than not knowing what crypto is at all. It'll be very useful information in the next few years. Trump receives urgent note from Rubio on Mid-East peace deal during Antifa roundtable. President Donald Trump was holding a roundtable event with conservative influencers about Antifa Wednesday when Secretary of State Marco Rubio, standing in the back corner of the White House's Blue Room, caught his eye. He had news for Trump, he said, but it would have to wait until after the media left. Then Rubio passed the president a note. News photographers covering the event zoomed in on the handwriting on White House Secretary that read, and that's where it cut off, "You need to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first. I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal on the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly," Trump said. "So we'll take a couple more questions." The influencer event had already been going on for more than an hour when Rubio first approached. The president invited him to come in, and Rubio whispered something to Trump before handing him the note. The note's urgent tone came as Trump's top Middle East advisor, Steve Witkoff, Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, and other senior officials joined a third day of peace talks between Israel and Hamas at an Egyptian resort Wednesday, a sign that negotiators aim to dive deeply into the toughest issues of an American plan to end the war in Gaza. Trump had kicked off the influencer event by telling assembled journalists that he planned to travel to the Middle East toward the end of the week, and could even make the rounds in the region to Egypt and possibly the Gaza Strip as US negotiators closed in on a deal. Well, I've already said enough about the peace deal and how this is a step closer to peace in Gaza. Something I will add regarding the story alone. Whatever extra detail is involved that not many people pick up on, that is the few reasons why I'm not going to jump to conclusions. No one's going to know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing for the peace talks. All we can hope is that there is progress in the peace talks and something can be agreed on by all parties, where everyone wherever people live around the world can continue to live their lives without any violence whatsoever. Although it's not guaranteed. Even if the peace talks has been solidified and it's been agreed upon, nothing is guaranteed for certain. Actually, I had that discussion with Eric. Not in full detail. It's just Eric shared something in the chat. It was a Twitter X post reading Hamas has accepted President Trump's proposed ceasefire with Israel and agreed to phase one of the Gaza peace plan, which includes the return of hostages and upcoming prisoner exchanges, according to Sky News. That's that's Twitter X post that Eric shared in the group chat along with Risk. He replied with exclamation mark, and then I played an audio and I sent him a voice note responding to that post, and I replied, "This has happened many, many times before. One of those times has actually led to October 7th." And yeah, I left it at that. I also added, let's just see how this goes, and I'm not going to jump to conclusions until eventually something has been solidified, like something has actually been agreed upon by all parties. That was the end of that voice note I said in response to the Twitter X post that Eric shared in the group chat. I will end once and for all for this episode. I will end on this. I hope the peace talks do end up being a success. And even when they do become a success, I hope that whatever peace comes from that, for both the Gazans, the Israelis, and the governing bodies of both the two states, I hope that everyone involved can live their lives the way they want to live lives without having to be caught in a violent crossfire of any kind. And I hope that no more destruction is to be caused from either side within any territory whatsoever. It's not much as of now. It is a start. It's a start of something greater. It's nice to see that something is being drafted up and it is going to be positive across the globe. And I hope that continues consistently. Russia, China, and North Korea are using ChatGPT to influence you. Here's how. Oh, that's going to be interesting. According to a report from OpenAI, foreign adversaries, including Russia, China, and North Korea, have increasingly used artificial intelligence tools, such as ChatGPT, for hacking and influence operations targeting the United States. The report states that Russian actors used ChatGPT to generate scripts, translate content, produce video descriptions, and generate hashtags for social media campaigns aimed at spreading influence. OpenAI claims to have suspended several accounts associated with security concerns and states. In other cases, operators would use ChatGPT to generate video prompts, which would then be put into other AI tools. Those videos will then be shared on social media platforms like TikTok and Twitter X. One specific operation generated French language content that criticized French and American actions in Africa, while praising the role of Russia there. That same operation would also generate content in English criticizing Ukraine and its international supporters. OpenAI stated that it ultimately banned several accounts linked to China, including a small network of accounts associated with a covert influence operation. Those accounts reportedly mostly generated social media posts in English criticizing Vietnam and the Philippines. It also generated content about US political issues. They also observed phishing campaigns targeting South Korea diplomatic missions, similar to those identified in a separate report. And what is that report, people would say? Well, the report in question is www.trilix.com/blog/research/DPRK-linked-GitHub C2-espionage-campaign/. That's the report in question. That the report has identified the missions of the phishing campaigns targeted South Korean diplomatic missions. Well, I can't say that. Well, I can't convince people otherwise that Russia, China, North Korea, and of course the United States to some extent, they don't actively push to have influence in other countries and have influence other people. Like, why do we even know about these countries to begin with? You don't just hear about these countries because of the landmass, the military, and whatever the heck they're going to do in Africa and Asia, Middle East, whatever. There is some kind of operation, whether government affiliated or just independent individuals that are likely from said countries to tell the world that the countries that they are a part of and the governments, they're doing great things for the world. But to what extent is the question? Not to say you should go against your government, but I would certainly not say that you should believe everything that they say. It's important that people do their own research regarding what goes on in the world, and especially what governments around the world and world leaders are saying about specific issues. Of course, they will all be in good intent. They will all address serious issues with good intention, as they should. But is that enough? Is it enough for world leaders to say, this is a problem, we have to do something? No, it's not enough. Something has to be done. Immediately. And even if something has to be done, about literally anything, about serious problems, what's the end goal? What is the long-term plan to tackling said issue? You can't you can't just say, we'll do this, we'll do that, put a plaster, and boom, problem solved. No, no, no. That's the last thing anyone should ever do when tackling anything. To say, do A, B, and C, and then you get X, Y, Z. No, there is much more to anything in this world than to say, that's the problem, here's what we should do, and that is it. How are you going to do it? You're going to need stages to eventually get to the end goal. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the fact that Russia, China, North Korea allegedly is using ChatGPT to influence people. I know a lot of people will have a lot of opinions, have a lot to say on that. And you know what? I don't blame them. I do not blame them in the slightest. I'd be concerned if they weren't bringing up those concerns or have such issues with that in any regard. And the thing is, this is just Russia, China, North Korea. It's not just those countries you should be worried about. I think you should be worried about a lot of countries. Because you never know if there are other countries that may not be as big, may not be big in landmass or military power. They could also do the same thing. The thing is, the scale they're operating at is far smaller. And operating at a smaller scale means no one's going to pick up on it until it is too late. Now, I'm not going to just point fingers at any random nation. However, you can't just say that the big nations like Russia and China are to blame. Yes, they are concerning, and people should be worried about those countries, but they're not the only ones. These are not the only countries you should be concerned about. Nor countries as a whole you should be concerned about. I know it's a lot to take in, a lot of doom and gloom in my end. It's just when it comes to like what has an influence over you, you need to ask yourself, do I agree with what's been said? Do I believe in what's been said here? You don't have to be you don't have to be skeptical of everything. You just have to question what these nations, companies and organizations are doing. And why are they doing it? how are they doing what they are doing? Because everything has a reason. People don't get billions of dollars from selling iPhones. People don't just spill waste into the ocean. You gotta think, what's the reason? Why are we hearing about this? Why are these people doing these things? And what do they plan on doing in the end? Are they getting close to achieving what they want to achieve? Those are the questions. In any regards in our world, we should be asking ourselves, no matter what. Even if you agree and you are a massive supporter of whatever the cause is, you still have to question. Is it too good to be true? Does it make sense? Will there be good coming out of this? With that being said, all of this being said, that is the episode.